We're at Fountainhead Regional Park in Northern Virginia, and today I've got two things to talk about. My first impressions of the Action 5 Pro and an issue, and then a huge issue I ran into with the Orbea Wild. It's an issue I discovered after buying the bike, plus something that I both love and hate about it at the same time. So stick around. First up, the Action 5 Pro. Now, obviously this footage was recorded with the Action 5 Pro so you can see for yourself just how it performs, but about the huge issue I mentioned. If you've done any research online, you've probably heard about the so-called bitrate problem. When the camera first launched, it was capped at only 60 megabits per second at a 4K resolution using 30 frames per second. People were frustrated, but a recent firmware update actually fixed it. Now you can enable the high bitrate mode in the settings. This video was shot using the default standard setting. What you're seeing right now is exactly how it performs out of the box with the default bitrate settings, and I think it looks good. I've had a chance to use the Action 5 Pro now a few times, and I have to say, so far, no complaints. But the real kicker? The battery life is insane. I'm getting 4 times the battery life compared to my old GoPro 8. They claim 4 hours of continuous recording on their website, but the caveat there is that is at 1080p. I typically record in 4K and I was able to still get over 2 hours of continuous recording, which is amazing. Instead of having to constantly stop and start footage, I can just let the thing record the entire time. On top of that, the colors, the image quality, especially in low light, are great. Next up, let's talk about the Orbea Wild and the issue I ran into. I bought the Wild from a local bike shop near me after what felt like an eternity. It was about 2 months. It finally arrived. I used the MyO program to customize a few things. Now, if you want it faster, you can just pick a stock color and configuration. You can get it usually within a few weeks. I ordered the Team Edition, XT components, Fox factory suspension. I'm not gonna bore you with all the components. You know, XT components are on a million bikes. So let's get to the issue. So I get the bike, super stoked to ride it after such a long time. I mean, the anticipation was literally killing me. I think I died 4 times. On my first ride, the bike cut off 3 miles from the trailhead in some pretty technical terrain. And when I say cut off, I mean it was dead. It wouldn't turn back on. And let me tell you, trying to pedal an e-bike, or specifically a Bosch equipped e-bike with no power, is like pedaling through sludge. It was brutal. I get back home, I check the firmware, battery, motor, and controller all on different firmware versions. I also found out something else. I had been reading online about a problem where the controller cable can get pinched between the frame and the battery. So I removed the motor guard at the bottom of the bike, and sure enough, it looked like the dropper and controller cables had been sort of jammed between the battery and the frame. I don't know that was the issue, but it was concerning. Here's the thing. The shop I bought the bike from wasn't Bosch certified. That's right, they sold me a bike they couldn't service properly. Not only would I have expected them to update the firmware before handing it over to me, but it took the shop owner, working with the Orbea rep, 2 weeks to get it sorted. He literally had to pay a Trek shop to update the firmware. They also had to put in a warranty request to reroute the cable, just in case that was an issue. So after that work was done, I haven't had an issue since. The lesson there is to make sure that your local bike shop is certified to work on the bike that you're buying. Now, what's the thing that I both love and hate about the Wild? Well, it's the stiffness. This bike is insanely stiff. What does that mean? It means you feel everything. Every rock, every bump, every root. And the result? Massive arm pump. You can actually see in the clip, he's actually battling this exact issue. After my first ride, I actually thought, have I made a mistake? But I've managed to tame it a little bit with some tweaks, and we'll get to that in a second. Let's first talk about why stiffness isn't all bad. A stiff bike isn't just a punishment machine. It's precise, it corners beautifully, it pumps incredibly well, it transfers the power to the ground with efficiency. When you're ripping through rough sections, it's stable as a rock, even if it bucks like a wild horse at times. So how did I reduce the arm pump? 2 things. First, I picked up the 1UP E-Bar, which is designed to be 20% more compliant compliant than most bars out there. That's what they claim. I've actually seen some testing from third parties where they semi-scientifically tested that, and it did seem that there was quite a bit more compliance. I think they actually showed that they were roughly about 20% more compliant. It just bends a little bit more and kind of soaks up some of that harshness, and it did make a difference. But second, I softened the front fork. I lowered the PSI compared to what it said I should be at in the manual. I also removed 2 tokens from the fork. It came with 4 because it's the e-optimized version of the fork in this bike. So 4 tokens was a lot. I took that down to 2, and I also completely opened up the compression. So with all of that, it definitely took the edge off, but the bike still has the stiffness. It's just no longer punishing. In the end, I agree with a lot of the other reviews out there.
It is a fine specimen of the machine.
The Orbea Wild is awesome. Just make sure you do your homework when buying from a local shop.
Get right.